What's up, Commonwealth, and welcome back to the Bluegrass Soccer Cast, your home for all things soccer right here in the state of Kentucky. I'm your host, Jimmie Martin, and today we have another banger for you. But let's start the episode like we always do by going off the top. So I want to continue talking about promotion and relegation here, especially in the state of Kentucky for this time, right? So, if you think about our first week where we talked about this, we talked a lot about how, investors in those upper division teams, whether that's MLS, USL champion, etc., they really aren't as interested in promotion relegation because they don't want to lose their investment. They don't want to see their franchise be devalued, therefore be worth less money, right? You also see another big issue is the constant turnover of these smaller clubs. The UPSL and other smaller leagues are so fraught with many teams that just come in for 1-2 seasons and then bounce, right? If you look in Kentucky, I think the fastest example of that would be the Alliance FC up in Louisville that paid their fees but never played, I guess. Or if you look at what's happened in E-Town, they had 2 teams at one point, but now they have 0. So just constant turnover in those lower leagues. And then, just kind of thinking about all the things that go into having a competitive soccer program, that can really add up, right? Then let's jump to what we kind of talked about last week. We talked about some of the strategies and some of the challenges that these smaller clubs are going to face and are currently facing, especially with trying to get into those more prestigious leagues. Sometimes it's just not financially feasible. So therefore, without some rich owner or some kind of massive sponsorship deal, they can't make it happen. No matter how much the desire may be there, they just can't get it to work without the money. So for this week, I want to really kind of look a little bit further into developing and creating a more competitive region for soccer here in Kentucky, right? So I think that starts top down. I think, one, we need to continue to see our clubs do well. So we have our big teams that we have right now, the Blue Cities, Racing Louisville, Lexington Sporting Club, both men's and women's, BGFC, Pumas, etc. Like, those are our big 5 right now. We need to continue to see them do good, to continue to show the profitability of this state and of the interest that we have in this sport. But let's kind of think about, why would this happen? Why would there be expansion within Kentucky, right? Number one, money. That seems to be the crux of all of this. If you don't have money, you don't have a whole lot of options for what you can do as far as paying your players or improving your facilities, getting into higher leagues, etc., etc. So we would need to see investors coming in, Kentuckians coming in, and really putting the sport on their backs and help carrying it up this big hill. But I think there's something coming up really soon that can really help, and that's the 2026 World Cup. I think that this really could be a launching pad for a lot of these changes that I'm going to talk about today, so much so that some of these things could happen in 2026. Some of these could happen before, 2030. But I think that will give a platform around our state to continue to grow the interest in professional and semi-professional soccer within our state, so that we can really jump in and expand this state and expand on what we have to offer here. But so let's go crazy. Let's say the perfect situation happens, right? That's not going to happen, but let's just say it does. Say that we get the massive interest, we get influx of cash into the state for the sport. So what would happen? First off, I think Blue City would move up to the MLS. I have a strong feeling that the MLS is starting to lean on becoming more independent from the U.S. Soccer Federation. I'm not fully convinced yet that they're ready to concede from the U.S. Soccer, but I think they're they're pushing in that direction. If you look at what they're talking about right now with the Open Cup and talking about how bad it is and how terrible the field conditions are and how the streaming isn't good and so forth, which some of that I kind of agree with. I mean, the streaming on one YouTube site would be nice, but they don't. Bleacher Report does a good job, but they don't cover all the matches. So when things aren't on that one place, it can be kind of confusing to find. But some of the other stuff just kind of comes across as more elitist. Your fields aren't good enough for us. Man, get out of here, Dan. So if that happens and they do, start to do their own things, if the MLS starts to pull away from the U.S. Soccer Federation, I think they're going to take several of the USL champion clubs and promote them up to the MLS. And maybe the MLS does their own promotion and relegation within that, but I don't have much information on that at this time. But say hypothetically they do pull away, right? I think they're taking Sacramento, if Sacramento doesn't have an MLS franchise already. I think they're going to take a team like San Antonio. And I think they're going to take someone like Louisville. And I'm sure I'm missing some teams from the champion that just didn't come off the top of my mind here. But I think Louisville would go then to the MLS. That would be our crown jewel. It already is. That stadium is phenomenal. It is ready for the MLS. It is ready for big-time soccer. Might want to add a few more seats in a couple of spots, but that's easily doable, right? So Louisville goes up. So then what happens next? I think Lexington would then move up to the USL champion, either through like a natural promotion or because the USL wants to have a team in Kentucky still in the champion level, so they move them up. And I think that leaves room for one more team in the USL. I think Bowling Green, whether that's BGFC or another Bowling Green centered franchise, would move into the USL League One in this scenario. So that would leave Louisville over in the MLS and in that ecosystem, and who knows what that could do. They could have their own second tier team, either in Louisville or somewhere else. And then over in the USL, you would have Lexington in the champion and then Bowling Green in League One. And I think there are some things that the USL can do to make promotion and relegation an even more viable option. I think a continual expansion of USL League One, I think continuing to further define USL 2, whether that's, do they just stick with this U23 format, or do they kind of truly develop that into a league below League One, if that makes any sense? I think, from what I've heard from USL representatives and from some of the things I've read, I think USL is going to do promotion and relegation. Now, when? I'm not for sure, but I think it's going to happen. Most likely, in my opinion, that'll be after the 26th World Cup, maybe by 2030 or something like that. So when that happens, and Lexington is the biggest USL team in the state, Bowling Green jumps up to the league below that, with chances of competing in a promotion and relegation system with Lexington. I think that leaves someone like the UPSL, because let's be honest, UPSL is not a great league. Their communication is terrible with their clubs. From a media side, they don't want to respond to any requests. I don't know what to tell you, folks. But let's say that the UPSL somehow sticks around and stays independent, because I think there's a chance that the UPSL and the USL could work together, either through a natural promotion and relegation with like a 4-tier, 5-tier system just within one ecosystem, or I think the UPSL could go their own way and just promote semi-professional soccer with promotion and relegation. And I think there is a lot of interest in that. They kind of already have the structures in place between the UPSL Premier, which is the highest level of competition, and then the Division I, which is just a slightly lower tier. But there's a lot of room that Division I needs to expand. Right now it's just kind of like the host for like big hubs. Excuse me. So like LA, New York, and stuff like that, like those huge markets that, your Sunday league champ wants to play other teams that are of equal caliber. They can go into that Division I there. But I think there's still a lot of room to continue to expand both the Premier and the Division I. So I came up with a top 10 list. And I broke them down into kind of Premier and Division I. And these are just within the state of Kentucky, cities that I think should host a UPSL team. Some of these could host it today. You could literally see by the fall, it might be too late for the fall, but definitely by next spring, you could see some of these cities with UPSL teams. And I would very much like to see it. I gave them a little bit of crap, but the UPSL is a place of opportunity. It's relatively reasonable for league fees to get into. It's relatively reasonable with ref fees. They get a bit eccentric with some of the stadium requirements, and then they don't enforce all the stadium requirements. But overall, I think this could happen as soon as spring 24. So, number one place on this list is a return to Louisville. You're like, ooh, wow, going out on a big limb for that one, right? I think there is room in the city for a second team, right? Yes, Lou City is going to take up 90% of the market. They're going to suck most of the air out of that room. However, I think there is still room for someone like a Metro Louisville. What was that team? Derby City Rovers, something like that. A semi-professional team to come in and have some marginal success in that city. I don't know if Louisville would get like a USL 2 team or anything like that, but maybe this is what could fill that void for that level of competition, right? You put a second team in Louisville and just kind of see what happens, right? Maybe they would be in a higher league than this. Maybe they would be in a MLS 2. I don't know. Who knows what Dan is cooking up over there with the MLS. Number 2 on the list. So I have 5 cities listed, but they're all one metro area. It's overall just the Lexington metro area, but I've included Lexington, Richmond, Nicholasville, Georgetown, and Versailles. You can't see my hand. Sorry about that. Lexington, Richmond, Versailles, Georgetown, and Nicholasville. Sorry, I was like, I missed one. Yes, Lexington Sporting Club is currently sucking a lot of air out of that community. But I think a little bit further down the road, maybe even next spring, you could have enough talent in the city or in the region to formulate an additional team. I don't think currently that there is that much of a demand, and I know that Lexington Sporting Club would probably push it heavily against any kind of competition because, the market is so new, right? They're going to want their chance to shine, but you could put a second team in one of those cities. Honestly, my biggest thoughts would be something like Versailles or Richmond. I don't think you're going to get another team in Georgetown just because, that's where Lexington is currently playing, and with all their stadium issues that Lexington Sporting Club is having, I don't think you're going to get a second team up there that quickly in one of those places. So to me, realistically, Richmond or Versailles, that would be the best place to go. Or maybe an inner city Lexington team. You put something playing at Transylvania or something like that. That could be something interesting. You could literally see next spring BGSC at, I don't know, Lexington United. Make it happen, somebody. Number 3 on the list, coming across the state now to Owensboro, Kentucky. Now, I know what you're thinking. Owensboro is known for 2 things, right? bluegrass music, and barbecue. There should be a third thing on that list, and that's sports, because they do really have a good sports-centric community. They've seen some success with the Owensboro Thoroughbreds, which is a minor league basketball team in the city. And I think the only next natural step would be to add a soccer team. I know there are some indoor teams and leagues that have been in and out of existence in Owensboro in the past several years, but I think there's room to go a full semi-professional outdoor team within Owensboro. And I think you could see something as soon as maybe even this fall, but definitely by next spring. Like, Owensboro is a big enough community that they could drive home and get something accomplished pretty quickly. And I would want to see that. I'd want to see more competition on the western side of the state for talent, challenging Evansville with Midwest Hooligans, taking some of that pull from them, really pulling from, that central western Kentucky area. There's a lot of talent that could be had there, and I think it would be really good to have that team, or a team in that city, I should say, in the UPSL. Number 4 on the list, Paducah. Now, I know what you're thinking. Whoa, hey, hold on, Slugger. What about Pumas? I need Pumas to make a decision. Either be all Paducah or be all Mayfield. Stop playing in between. That's 45 minutes in between each place. Stop trying to drag the difference between the two, right? I understand that McCracken County and Paducah can be sometimes hard to find facilities, right? Make it happen, Captain. If Pumas is going to be Paducah's team, I hope that they can accomplish that, and I wish them the best. If that happens, then we'll replace Paducah on number 4 with a Mayfield Murray kind of agreement. Those two locations are so close that you really could either split your time between the two, or you could easily draw between one or the other. Murray might have the slight advantage just because of the college town nature of it. They've already got some infrastructure. I don't know if the university would allow you to use that beautiful pitch that they have on campus. Maybe for the spring, but I don't know. Spring soccer at the collegiate level is really booming, so they may not even have that available for you to use. So, but Paducah, number 4, and or Mayfield Murray, depending on whatever Pumas actually decides to do to permanently put themselves in a location. Number 5, we're going to go all the way across the state, all the way up there to northern Kentucky, and I'm talking about the communities of like Covington, Florence, Highland Heights, that kind of area, right? Like, I know that's a big triangle between those 3 cities, but that northern Kentucky area, this part of our state does not get enough attention from the west, from the south, and definitely from the far east side of our state, the entire eastern side of the state, let's be honest. I think there is enough room in that community to have a Kentucky represented side. Now, 2 teams that, are kind of in that area already. One is a club called King's Hammer. I know they've got like a USLW team that's coming on. I'm not for sure what other professional, semi-professional teams they may have in the books. But I know that's a big club up there. And then there's the obvious FC Cincinnati, the MLS side. Of course, they're going to take a lot, if not all, of the talent out of that community to go play for Cincinnati. No brainer. But I think there is enough over a large enough athletes over a large enough area to really warrant another franchise up in that area. And I think the UPSL is the perfect place to start something like that. Next, we're going to move to number 6, which is a city that's had UPSL teams before. In fact, they've had 2 different UPSL teams, and that's Elizabethtown. I think this is a crossroads kind of town, literally in the middle of our state, not far from Louisville, not far from Lexington, Bowling Green, Owensboro, almost anything. It can be very easily accessed by. 2 major interstates cross there. It is by far the heart of Central Kentucky. It's a growing population. The community college there is booming. They've got some tech companies that are coming into to Elizabethtown. Cute, quaint downtown. They honestly probably should be higher on this list. Maybe you could push them up as high as 4, maybe 3. But for right now, I have them at 6 just because there have been 2 clubs that have been there that have folded. And maybe that was from poor management. Maybe it was from a lack of interest in their fans. I'm not quite for sure. So that kind of, to me, gives me a lot of caution. So that's why I pulled them down to number 6. All right. 7 and 8 are not together, but I'm keeping them in the Premier Division conversation. But I think they are definitely, there's a difference between 6. There's a gap between 6 and 7, in my opinion. And I think there's a gap between 8 and 9 and 10 as well. But I think these two cities could absolutely host a UPSL Premier Division team. And if we get promotion and relegation in the UPSL in Kentucky between, Premier and Division 1, I think these are 2 cities that could start in Division 1 and easily move up to Premier, or could start in Premier and might struggle and fall back to Division 1. Who knows? So number 7 on the list, Pikeville. Beautiful city, lots of nature out there, but there's not a whole lot of other stuff, right? So it's got a decent population, small university there, but it's so isolated that all communities around Pikeville filter in for different events, right? And I think that could be key and critical to the success of a Pikeville-based UPSL Premier Division team. They've got to get not just the city of Pikeville, but the community around Pikeville to come into the city and to support that team. Number 8 on the list kind of seems like an obvious choice, but I don't know. They weren't higher on the list because I think other communities have a better package, like an overall package to take in. But number 8 on the list, Frankfort. Halfway between Louisville and Lexington, our state capital, Frankfort, Kentucky. I think this could be a sleeping giant for a UPSL franchise. Heck, I think this could be the home of a semi-professional basketball team as well. They've got the convention center there that hosts, some smaller basketball tournaments and stuff like that. Yes, it's a bit dated, but I think this could be a sleeper. You've got the money from the capital. You've got the industry around town. And I really think Frankfort could see lots of success in the UPSL. Now, the reason that is even below Pikeville on this list is because, for whatever reason, there's just not a lot of draw for sports in that city. KSU, Kentucky State University, doesn't have a whole lot of draw as far as, success of getting people to come to their games for basketball, football, etc. So I'm not for sure what would really draw the community in. I think soccer could be that, but I'm not for sure. So now, the last 2 teams on this list, I think would definitely be part of a Kentucky-Tennessee Division 1, which would be, the second tier within our region here. So the first one, Berea. Berea is beautiful. It is a quaint little college town, charming little downtown area, some good restaurants. I just don't know if they have the population or the infrastructure even to host any kind of a semi-professional team. So that's why I put them down in Division 1, because I'm just not really for sure. Like, I think the city is there, and I think the population could be there, especially, if you played while college students were in the area. But I think geographically it makes sense. When you're looking at putting all of these points on a map, right? It makes sense. but I'm just not really for sure if they could field a competitive premier team. So I put them down in the Division 1. And then lastly, number 10 is 2 cities, but there would only be one team, and that's London and Corbin. Pretty close together in that, would that be South Central Kentucky area. A growing population area with, the recreation and some lakes in the area and stuff like that. But there is also movement in our government to have a Southern Kentucky University or some version of a title like that in that region, either in London, Corbin, maybe even in Berea. So I think there's a lot of momentum pushing towards the growth in population in South Central Kentucky, South Central Eastern. What, you get it? You know where it is. Look at it on the map if you don't. I'm not here to teach geography. That's what your teachers are for, right, kids? But I think there's enough of a population in either of those cities, enough industry, and enough interest in soccer to potentially have a Division 1 team. Depending on what happens with either of these two options, if you get a new plant in the area, if you got a new university in that area, you could easily see one of those, numbers 9 and 10 jump up into the Premier Division. But for now, I'm keeping them down there in the Division 1. So just recapping our top 10 cities in the state of Kentucky that should have a UPSL team. Again, this is assuming we're doing promotion and relegation. So the Premier Division, a second team in Louisville. Number 2, a second team in the greater Lexington area. Most likely, in my opinion, that would be in either Richmond or Versailles. Maybe Georgetown after Lexington Sporting Club gets their permanent home. But number 3, Owensboro. Number 4, Paducah. Number 5, Covington, Florence, Highland Hills, something like that. Or, sorry, Highland Heights. My apologies. Number 6, E-Town. Number 7, Pikeville. Number 8, Frankfort. And then dropping down to what would be a brand new Division 1 within the UPSL Kentucky, Tennessee region would be Berea at 9, and then London or Corbin at number 10. So wrapping kind of all of this promotion and relegation conversation up, right? First and foremost, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we could ever talk about a full-scale promotion and relegation system just in our state, but definitely within our country, right? I do foresee that the MLS will separate itself from the rest of the U.S. Soccer Federation. I think they will be completely separate from the soccer pyramid. They're going to do their own things. Maybe they steal some of these teams. Maybe they get an affiliation with like NISA Nations or NISA, and use that as a launch pad for additional franchises within the MLS umbrella, right? But I think the UPSL and the USL are primed and are ready to do promotion and relegation. I think they will either work together to create like a 4-tiered system of promotion and relegation, or they could at least both have a 2-tier. USL could even have a 3-tier depending on what the future of the USL 2 is. And what happens when all of this movement happens is I think there will be plenty of room in this state for expansion. And I think there will be a competitive desire for promotion and relegation in this state once it happens. There's nothing more exciting than coming down to the last day and your team's been mid-tier all season, but 2 losses in a row, and you find yourself 1 spot above relegation. That is a stressful time as a fan, but it sure makes everything a lot more interesting. And, last thing I want to talk about on this, it's kind of a timeline. Again, I said it earlier, I don't think any of this will happen really until 2026. I mean, maybe some of these markets could already start popping up with some UPSL franchises. But as far as like big movement goes, it's not going to happen until after the World Cup, until all the money is counted and, all of the audience numbers are recorded and all of that stuff. So really that late 26 through 2030 timeframe for a lot of this kind of movement. But that'll kind of, conclude. I don't think I'll be talking about promotion relegation again next week, but who knows? I may have more to say about it. But with that, let's go to our next segment, the bottom line. And we got a couple of weeks worth of content here, so this segment's gonna go a little bit longer than it usually does. But first, always want to start with Louisville. This time we're gonna start with Lou City. 2 matches to talk about. One was the U.S. Open Cup, which was a 1-0 loss to FC Cincinnati, which is the MLS side. Despite Louisville outshooting, outpacing, and generally getting the better of all of the chances in that matchup, FC Cincinnati, the MLS side, did notch home a 85th minute goal, thus knocking Louisville out of this year's U.S. Open Cup. So the boys in purple had to regroup quickly from that tough loss as they took a trip to Memphis to take on Memphis 901 FC back in the USL Championship competition. And Memphis was coming off a huge upset, a cup set, if you will, over MLS side Atlanta United. So all momentum was with Memphis, right? But Louisville struck first, went up 1-0, and had to hold on at the end because they did let in a late goal. But Louisville City did hold on to the draw 1-1. And now kind of looking ahead to what Louisville's got next. They were off this past weekend because of the Derby. I think that's great. I think all of our teams that's in our state should do that. But maybe that's, giving too much credit to our, one of the 3 things that our state is known for. But the boys in purple will be back this week as they host Miami FC, and I believe that game will be on ESPN, if not ESPN2. So I will predict this game. I'm going to start adding predictions into this segment, just kind of beef it up a little bit. I will take Lou City to win 1-0 over Miami FC. Want to stay in Louisville. Want to talk about Racing Louisville, our ladies in lavender, as I like to say. They had 2 matches. They had a heartbreaking 2-2 draw with the OL Reign, which is out of Washington State. They led, Racing Louisville led 2-0, but in the second half, the Megan Rapinoe and Rose Lavelle led OL Reign team had a comeback, and Racing Louisville held on for a 2-2 draw against arguably one of the more talented NWSL teams out there. But so it's good that they didn't completely blow up. They held on to that draw, but disappointment would come a-knocking this past weekend as they had a 1-0 loss to Orlando Pride. And that's a tough one to swallow because Orlando is literally just right above them in the table. So I feel bad for them. That was a close game, very competitive between the 2 sides, but Orlando just knocked one home. That does leave, though, Racing Louisville winless so far this season in the NWSL. But their next match isn't that far away. They face their neighbors to the north in the Chicago Red Stars. And in this one, I will take Racing Louisville to get their first win of the year, 2-0 over Chicago. Now we'll shift over to Lexington. They had one matchup since the last time we gave an update, which was a 3-1 loss to Chattanooga Red Wolves. And that scoreline isn't quite explanatory of how that match really went. It was much closer than 3-1. Lexington actually had the lead in the second half, but Chattanooga just kind of piled on a couple late goals, made it look like it wasn't nearly as close as it truly was. But 3-1 was the final in that one. And the next for Lexington, they're back at home against the Charlotte Independent, who are currently in second place in the USL League One. Predictions, I think I'm going to take Charlotte 2-1 over Lexington. I I just think Lexington is a much better team at home than they are on the road. But Charlotte is a top-tier USL League One franchise at this time, and I just don't think Lexington's got the horses. See what I did there? Lexington doesn't have the horses to close that gap at this point. But Lexington did beat South Georgia at home a couple of weeks ago, and they have been widely considered one of the best USL League One teams. So who knows? And now let's drop down to the semi-professional ranks. Pumas Premier, they actually picked up 2 wins this past weekend, both down in Nashville. 1-0 over the abysmal Nashville Now 365 AT&T DirecTV.com franchise. And then a 1-0 win over PCDA, which is the Pre-College Developmental Academy. So that was 6 points off of 2 goals in 2 days, putting the Pumas on a 3-game winning streak and bumping them up to 4th place in the UPSL Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division standings. Upcoming matches for Pumas. Hypothetically, they have 2 games this weekend in St. Louis. I say hypothetically because I never know what's going to happen with Pumas and their games. I feel like they are the hardest team for me to keep track of. But they hypothetically have 2 games in St. Louis this weekend. The first one, I will take a 1-0 victory over St. Louis Fusion for Pumas. And then I think they will lose their next one to St. Louis City Academy. Yes, the MLS Academy for St. Louis City. Pumas actually beat them 3-1 back in earlier in the season. I think that game was in Mayfield. But I think this time flip the scoreline 3-1 St. Louis. But who knows? Pumas did, like I said, Pumas did beat them. Maybe they can do it again. Man, if they did it again, whoo, that'd be crazy. They would really skyrocket up our weekly power rankings if that happened. Then we're going to close out the segment here talking about BGFC. BGFC had a disappointing 2-2 draw with Beeman United in the 231 Derby. After being up 2-0 with only 15 minutes left in the game, BGFC gave up 2 goals late that you just can't let up. You know, the coaching staff over there made a lot of changes. They were really trying to just cling to that 2-0 lead. And I don't know. I wouldn't have made some of those same changes. But, you know, it is what it is. That's the first time, on the positive side of things, that's the first time that BGFC has ever gotten points against Beeman. They've gotten beat very badly by Beeman on a couple occasions. They played them close last fall in the U.S. Open Cup match, but it was a hard pill to swallow. And if you listen to the commentary, you heard the pain in the announcers' voices. But BGFC was able to bounce back this past weekend with a 2-0 win over the hapless Midwest Hooligans. This was a very competitive matchup, really. For whatever reason, Midwest Hooligans kept breaking down one of the wings. I think it was the left side of the BGFC's defense. So I don't know if that was a tactical advantage that they had, it was a skill advantage or what, but it was a very competitive game between those two sides. But BGFC still got the win. Despite like the 75th, 77th minute, something like that, their keeper got sent off. So it was just kind of chaos at the end, but BGFC was able to hold on. Up next for the Golden Lions will be a rematch with Midwest, but this time on the road in Evansville, Indiana. Predictions for that matchup: I will take BGFC to win 2-1, but I think this could easily be flipped, and I could see Midwest because they're at home, and BGFC having such a struggle to travel that I wouldn't be shocked if it's 2-1 or even 1-0 for Midwest. But those are my predictions. So with all of that out of the way, let's now jump to our weekly interview segment. This week, we have the general manager and backup goalkeeper for the Midwest Hooligans that I just talked about, Auston Bruder. We had a great conversation just about, the culture and the difference of, being in that part of our state, being outside of the state in Evansville, Indiana. But let me pass it off to myself just in a different shirt.
Honestly, I'd love to tell you that I would never have to play a game. I'm pushing 30. I'd love to be able to get guys into the program that were better than me.
Right.
Looks like I'm probably going to start this Friday.
Okay.
But it's really close between me and the main goalie, Grant Allen, who's actually an Owensboro guy.
Hey, how'd you see him from like BGFC or whatever?
Yeah. So he is usually the starter. He's dealing with a little bit of an injury he got in the Beaming game to start the season. He got absolutely crunched on a tackle. So dealing with a little bit of a dead leg is what we're calling it. So we're kind of working through that right now. So we're going to see how he is going into Friday. He played this past weekend and it really bothered him. So we're going to just see how that goes.
Okay. And, with injuries, and we've talked about that on the podcast here, actually, the last couple of episodes that we've released, we had the trainer from BGFC was on. And, we always talked about how, you're only 6 weeks away from getting to where you want to be. So, if it's a soft tissue injury or something like that, dead leg, however, whatever the actual injury is, like, I hope it's not too long. But, it could always be longer than you think, but hopefully not. So, Austin, to kind of kick us off here, I have a very interesting question. I always like to try and make the first question something interesting, and so the audience can get to know you a little bit more. So would you say that people in the community would know you more as a goalkeeper / just soccer person, a DJ, or a Harry Potter fan?
Oh, man, that is a great question. It really just depends of the circle you're in.
Right.
The circles that know soccer and sports really probably don't even know I DJ. I think there's some guys on the team that don't know I DJ, or are not old enough to even go to the bars to see me DJ.
Oh, wow.
There are the people that go out and are at the bars and really probably don't even know that I play soccer. They only know me as a DJ.
Huh.
And the Harry Potter fan's kind of a closet thing. My wife has definitely converted me there. But no, it's we do a lot of Harry Potter stuff. Our home has actually got a lot of Harry Potter decorations in it. But it's not something that I'm super public with. I'm not a big, I don't want to say nerd, but I definitely am not in it like some other people. Like, I'm not going to win any trivia competitions.
Okay.
But I'm definitely a Hufflepuff. That's my house. I support.
Okay, that was the next question. Thank you for getting me ahead of me.
Yeah. So I want to play a game of Quidditch really bad. I know that I don't think it's called that anymore. I think it's called quad ball. I went to the University of Southern Indiana and they had it out there, but I never got an opportunity to play. But it looks so much fun, and I think maybe my endurance isn't there, but I definitely think I like being a goalie and catching a ball. I think it could be something I could be good at.
Oh, absolutely. And, they have kind of a goalie type position, right? Like, they still move around a little bit more than a goalie, but I don't think I could get over the whole running with the broom between my legs kind of a thing. Like, I don't know if I could do that.
I don't know either. I've never, it's not something I've ever really done, so I can't really speak on it.
Right.
Definitely going to be awkward to not be able to like really stride with like a stick between your legs. So yeah, no, it could be interesting. I think it would be fun to jump in. Maybe one day at practice for the Hooligans, we can bring some brooms out and have them try it.
Maybe on like an indoor day or something like that.
Yeah, for
Have
sure.
a little fun. Like a nice little relaxer right before like the playoffs or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. So I'm going to go on and kind of talk about something that I know some of the comments are going to say before you even get them written. Well, you may have already got them written at this point, but so Evansville, Indiana, not in Kentucky, very clearly.
Right.
But one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to you, Austin, was because of the cultural impact that Evansville has on Western Kentucky specifically, but on the Commonwealth in general. So, growing up, I grew up in Western Kentucky, right? So going to Evansville was just what we did. You know, if we wanted to go to the mall, if we wanted to go see a concert, if we wanted to go to a sporting event, even Evansville was the place. You know, that's where we had to go for all of that. So, you know, Auston, from your perspective, what was it like kind of growing up in Evansville, and did you notice the culture and the impact that it may have had on Western Kentucky, especially growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I was born right outside of Lexington.
Okay.
My mom actually moved to Evansville when I was really young, obviously before I could remember it. And I didn't get into soccer until close to, I would say, probably like 12. So I was older. I wasn't a munchkin playing. I was a little bit older. But when I noticed it is my high school, Evansville Memorial, who's really good at soccer, we would go and play in a tournament called the Kentucky Indiana Challenge. And that was when I really started to notice the level of ability of these kids in Henderson, Owensboro, Louisville, even some of
Madisonville, shout out to my town.
even some of the small county schools had some really good teams, and we always enjoyed that tournament because it gave us a new perspective on the game. Playing the same Evansville schools, Evansville Memorial was always that powerhouse. So being able to go play some of these schools, and again, they play really good physical competitive soccer. So it was great. And that was when I noticed it. Being able to then play travel in the Evansville area and seeing that like the Henderson kids didn't really have a lot of opportunity. So they'd come over to Evansville. You'd even get a few Owensboro kids that would come over. And those kids were
less than an hour from Owensboro, and literally 15, 20 minutes for some people in Henderson, right?
Yeah. I actually live closer to Henderson, to the state line, than I do to most of the soccer fields here. So I live on like the southeast side of town. So I'm pretty close to Henderson.
Close to the track, right? The horse track.
Ellis Park, my family's in horse racing. We go there every summer. So
I went all times as a kid.
Yeah, but no, it's been, I mean, it was, you noticed it young. I mean, I would say my first experience playing Kentucky schools and seeing the impact of those schools coming over to really give us a challenge was probably freshman year of high school. And it was great. I mean, we loved that tournament. We always wanted to play like the state champion of Indiana versus the state champion of Kentucky, just to really give it,
this would be awesome.
Kind of best in the area.
I'm all about those kind of like postseason tournaments, right? Like for whatever reason, I guess understand from like a cost perspective, right? Because like travel, etc., like that would be an extra cost on the team, right? But like, I just don't understand why we don't do some of those things. I played American football, and we actually played Boonville High School my senior year at Boonville, which from Western Kentucky up there was the longest out of the way place I think I could have ever played.
Right.
But it was just so exciting to play somebody from a different state. You know, it can be exciting to play like East Kentucky, West Kentucky, but like, why couldn't we do like an Indiana All-Stars versus Kentucky All-Stars, or like you said, state champ versus state champ? And I think they kind of do that in basketball because there is like a national tournament, but I don't know the what's the word I'm looking for, like the percentage of teams that actually participate versus like, is it just the big schools in your state, you know?
Right.
And, you know, with classification differences and stuff like that, you would almost need like a national example that every state would have to follow, because I'm sure a 6A in Kentucky isn't the same as a 6A in Tennessee. Well, I know that that's totally different, but
yeah, we actually didn't have classes in soccer in Indiana until my senior year, which was I graduated 2012. So that 2011 season was the first year of classes in the state of Indiana in soccer. So up until that point, my high school won state in 2008, and then made state finals again in 2010. And you could say you were the best in the state because you had beat everyone to get there. Now there's I think there's 3 or 4 classes now, but some of these schools don't play anybody, and you see state final scores that are like 6-7-0, and you're like, man, I wish they could actually play a good team. Yeah, we didn't have that when I was playing high school, which feels like forever ago. I just had my 10-year reunion this year, but it feels like it's been forever. But I really would love to see kind of that like tournament of champions. I'd love to see state champs go against
Yeah.
each other. I think for the game, it would be great to show those kids and the talent. Some of these kids don't play high school soccer, or the high school
Right.
soccer kids don't play travel soccer. So I'd love to see that at the high school level. I think that's just another way for the game to grow and show this talent, because some of these schools don't get to see kids, because in our area, high school soccer is in the fall, which is the same as college soccer. And so the college coaches, it's tough to recruit. So think if you had Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, all going to play their state champs against each other, it'd be a great recruiting opportunity for some colleges.
So this is actually great timing for a segment that I'm trying to think of our release time. It's probably already been released, but I'm working on it right now. Talking about promotion and relegation, that's the main topic. But, really looking at what are some things that we can do on the smaller level, whether that's with our clubs. So for you, for Midwest, and we'll talk about them in a second, or, some of the Kentucky smaller semi-professional clubs. But like, if we could even pull that down further to high school and really invest in the community and really help push the sport forward, I think it can only help the Indy 11s, Lou Cities, Lexington. Like, it can only help them by having a stronger base to pull from, right?
Oh, absolutely. At our level, there should be promotion or relegation, and we can definitely go into that more. But I think there should be this incentive. If you do well, you go to another level. You kind of push it up. Even at the state and the high school level, if you win at the state championship, I think you should immediately be promoted to the next year, or to the higher class. But they're like, well, kids graduate and things change. And I'm like, I understand. But at the same time, I think it would hold your team to a different level of standard. That's what I think. But also, how do you do relegation at some of these schools? At these big schools, just are football schools or basketball schools, and their kids just don't play soccer. So it becomes really tough. Like my high school, Evansville Memorial, only had 800 kids in it. And you have schools like Castle, who are in Newburgh, and they have, I think, like 25 to 3,000 kids. So it's a huge difference in kids, right? Yeah. You also have schools, like my wife went to a school called Tecumseh. It's in Elberfeld. She graduated with, I think her graduating class had 50 kids in it. Right. And I had classes that had 50 kids in it. So it's different, and they don't even have soccer up there. So there's not even an opportunity for those kids.
Not even like girls at all? Like no soccer?
Nope, no soccer. No men's, no women's. A few years ago before COVID, they reached out about having me potentially start a team up there, but
Look at
the time and effort to build one from absolute scratch, just I was not interested in it. The community up there I don't think a lot of those people, they're all farmers. Soccer is just not huge. And the football teams, the basketball teams, baseball, softball, that's where their focus is.
And I will come back to that promo and relegation section, because I do want to talk about that. But it kind of fits in a little bit later on in what we're talking about here. Because I do, like I said, by this point when this is released, like you kind of have some of my thoughts and some things. So I want to get another person's opinion too. But Auston, kind of want to, pull us back a little bit here. Talk to me about what is the soccer culture in Evansville?
It's a strange one, honestly. You have little niches that have really big, bleed soccer, love it. But for as big as a community we are, we don't have that huge pool that you would think. So like when the World Cup was going on, there was little spots that had watch parties, but the big places, they didn't do the watch parties. The big bars and things like that didn't have watch parties. We actually have a bar locally called Doc Sports Bar, and that was like the hub for soccer, but it only held like 100 people. And yeah, and you're talking about a community our size, and that's the biggest like watch party we can put together.
How big is Evansville at this point? 100,000, 200,000? How big?
Around about, I think, metropolitan area, I think we get close to the 200 mark.
Okay. But for only space for 100,
Yeah, I'll talk about it even from a rec soccer side of things. We have leagues, indoor leagues and outdoor leagues and things like that. And it's the same group of guys that seem to play in them all. There's really not like, okay, there's a Tuesday night indoor league. There's only 4 teams in it. You would think for a community our size that we could get 10, 15 teams to play of it's just 8 guys on a team. We can't. We only get 4. It's the same 4 teams that have been playing there for a while. So it's a strange one. Evansville doesn't support its local sports like you would think it does. Like the Otters have been around for a while.
Shout out to the Otters. Wow.
Yeah. I DJ for them, so
You do it?
yeah.
So I guess I should have said, so you DJ for the Otters, the University of Evansville, and then just like privately for parties and stuff, right?
Yep, and a lot of like bars and stuff like that. But those are the 2 main ones. So I do the University of Evansville and the Otters. So I'm really well versed in what happens there with those 2 organizations. So the Otters have been around for forever, and they have some games that they'll sell the place out, and they'll have some games where they don't do great. And the U of E has when they beat UK in basketball, that was huge. They couldn't get more people in the arena, and then they might have this past couple of years they've not been very successful, and they really struggle with tickets. The Icemen, the Evansville Icemen, or now it's called the Thunderbolts, not the Icemen. But the Thunderbolts have some games that go really well and have some games that don't. It's just really hit or miss. The Evansville community doesn't get really behind the sports teams, and I think honestly because it's tough to break into that the minds of people. Everybody's kind of set in their ways. The promotion side of thing is really tough. We don't get the support on social media and stuff that we thought we would when we really started it and put some promotion out there. We get a little bit of some fan turnout at some games, but not anything like we really expected being in our first season last year. We really thought we'd do some really decent numbers, and we did decent, but we kept saying we could do better. We could definitely do better. So we actually get a lot of support, and not to say anything, but from Owensboro, Henderson, that area of Kentucky is really supports us. Actually, the Owensboro newspaper is doing an article on the Hooligans. We've never had any kind of promotion from the Evansville newspaper or any kind of Evansville support, and that from the city. But we're getting support from Owensboro for us, and that we're excited that we're getting any kind of support, but really to get it from Owensboro, a town 45 minutes away, to us is amazing that we can draw that kind of approval from them. But locally, we have nothing. We have no newspaper articles. We've reached out to them, no news, no nothing. We can't get the backing from people to even come out and just like see what we're doing. It's pretty crazy.
And I think our listeners in Bowling Green would really identify with that. And maybe, honestly, even Louisville a little bit, right? I don't know the whole story for Louisville, but, for seeing what's happening in Bowling Green, like, it's a lot of similar struggles. You reach out to the local stations, you reach out to the local community and try to get that support. And it can be really hard to capture that attention, right, and keep it. Because, for BGFC, they had massive crowds that first year, like 300, or so every time. And then you watch some of the games from like last spring. Yeah, they weren't very competitive, but, you would get like 15, 20, so I feel you on that.
And at our level, I feel like it's always going to be a challenge if you're not winning every game.
Yeah,
it's going to be a challenge to get those people out. Our goal this season, especially with our home games, we only have 5. We've already had a team forfeit a game, so we only now have 4.
Wait, who forfeited?
St. Louis Fusion did not travel.
What? I didn't know that. I thought it was just postponed because I think I looked. I mean, again, this is.
We would love to make a rescheduled game up. The league is saying we don't have time to get a rescheduled game in, but they had supposedly a death in one of their players' families, and they're a really tight-knit group, and the players didn't want to travel, which totally understand. We were happy with it. We got an inter-squad inter-squad scrimmage out of it. We said we'd love to try to look at a reschedule date, and the league came back and said, hey, right now we don't have any availability on either of your schedules. And we were like, well, we didn't really ask us, but because we hate to lose the revenue or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, even the small revenue, 15, 20 people, that's still going to pay at least for the rental of facility or ref fees or something, right?
We look at if we can get 20 people to a game and we get a couple people that buy a couple shirts.
Right.
For us, that covers costs, but as well as the guys are playing for something. The guys have a few people there. So for us, that's what we look for. And we don't have a huge budget. So every little dollar counts to be able to help the team run.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I want to pick your brain on the UPSL here in just a second, but talk to me about, where did the concept of Midwest Hooligans come from? Who are you, or do you have partners that you're working with? Is it mostly just you? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I graduated from the University of Southern Indiana. I played Oakland City for 2 years, Oakland City University, and then the University of Southern Indiana. And when I got out of college, I tried out for the St. Louis Ambush, made the practice team, but ended up not wanting to move, which they're a pro indoor team. And then there was no other option locally for me to play besides local Hispanic league. So I had a bunch of buddies of mine who had graduated around the same time I did. We all kind of made a team in the local Hispanic league. We had been pretty competitive in that. And then we had a sponsor who backed out. Our team was called Elmwood United, which was just a restaurant. We had a sponsor back out. So instead of naming the team after a sponsor this season, we wanted to work with just a general name, and we could rotate sponsors in and out. We never planned to go to a semi-pro level. We just were looking to stay at that level. We couldn't come up with a name. My wife and I were sitting here. We had gone through a bunch of different names and nothing had really stuck. And at this time we were looking to travel to an indoor tournament in St. Louis. And so that was the next thing on the schedule. It was early February, and we went, what could we name ourselves? What could we look to do? And she said, well, you guys are just a bunch of hooligans anyway, so I don't know what we'll name you. And I was like, well, I really like that. That sounded good. And at that time everybody was from all over, especially when we were going to St. Louis. So there was probably a few guys from Evansville, a few guys from Indianapolis, a few guys from Owensboro, a few guys from Henderson. We actually had 2 guys come over from Louisville and a few guys from St. Louis. So there was, we would bring these teams together. It was all, oh yeah. Those indoor tournaments are a blast. We really enjoy those. But so we didn't want to just be one specific town. We kind of wanted to just tie everyone together, and that's where Midwest came from.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yep. So that was the tie there. There was no real tie to Evansville. We were just the Hooligans locally was our team name. When we would play in like the local Hispanic leagues and stuff, we were just the Hooligans. But when we would travel out of town, we were the Midwest Hooligans. We were playing in a local Hispanic league. We were doing really well. The team had gotten really competitive, and we were looking for some preseason friendlies, and that's when we reached out to BGSC, came down and played that very first friendly, the first game in BGSC history.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that was kind of the team that we had locally. We had a few guys from different areas. I mean, we had 2 guys drive down from Indianapolis for that game. So we had just some guys from all over. And after we got done with that, everybody had that like taste in their mouth. They're like, hey, we want to play not in the Hispanic league anymore. We want to play with better referees. We want to play on better fields. We're okay to travel we're okay to travel on a Friday night after we get off work. So at that time we were kind of just looking around. We had reached out to some different leagues, and at the same time, a local youth club, Indiana Fire Academy South, had reached out. They wanted to partner with us to have us be like the senior team and be the like semi-pro team. They were floating the idea of starting a semi-pro team at the same time we were. So they reached out,
or just in general?
Just in general.
Okay.
They didn't really know. They were just looking to expand into the adult side of soccer is really how they explained it. And so we had that. We worked with them, so we got to be able to use their facilities. They have leased a few facilities here that we get to train at and play our home games at and things like that. We have an indoor facility we get to use. And so with that partnership, we had kind of the foundation to grow off of. And that's how we decided to go with the UPSL, because at that time it didn't involve the most amount of travel. There were a team in Bowling Green, Paducah, Nashville. So it didn't really involve a lot of travel. So we were like, hey, this is where we'll start. The plan was just to always do the spring season. And for now it still is, because we have a lot of guys who coach college or are college players. The fields we use for our home games are used by high schools as well. So we can't use those in the fall. They're really particular about who uses them. So we're just going to stick with the spring season. But that's really how it got started. It was really just a group of guys that were still looking for a place to play. And we got really lucky. Everything kind of fell in place right at the same time, with Fire looking to expand what they were doing, us trying to go from local Sunday league all the way up into the semi-pro level.
Well, and that's a really good connection to have, right? Because not only did you have the people that you knew, but now you've got a whole nother group of players and folks that you can make connections with, and to really pull together a full team there.
Absolutely. And the biggest thing that we've seen is the connection with the community. There's 700 families in the Fire Academy South program. So with that, our promotion and everything like that gets out. A lot of our guys have become coaches for the club. So being able to get them involved with the youth level soccer, we've hosted a few camps. Our guys go out and help coach some of the sessions. Some of our international guys that are college kids can get some extra money by helping coach with some of the coaches and things like that. So it's been great to connect back with the community, but also to get the youth involved. And for us, that was, we saw the biggest part of our puzzle that we were missing was the youth side of it. We don't plan to start a youth club because we're partnered with Fire, but our goal was to try to get these kids into coming to the games and ball kids and involved. So that's why we do like the halftime games and things like that, to really keep the kid presence involved. We want to make sure that the kids have a good time at the games, and that it's something that they can one day hopefully strive to be a hooligan.
Right. Well, and if it's so mutually beneficial, right? Like, you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face, right?
Right, for sure.
So if you can both get good participation out of it, you all can get what you need from it. They can get what they need. I totally get it. So I appreciate you explaining the Midwest part, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not a big fan of the name.
I've heard the podcast before. I've heard what you said.
Thanks for listening. But so now, understanding more about the history behind it, I get why you don't want Evansville. And especially if they're not going to give you coverage, that doesn't give you an incentive to change the name to Evansville, right?
For sure. We've always said that if need be, we could move the team to Owensboro and still be the Midwest Hooligans. It's not to say that a rebrand or something like that isn't off the cards if the city were to get behind it. I don't know how we would work that out. Obviously, that would be a bridge we'd have to cross. It definitely, I would love to get more of a city involvement. I'd love to be the Evansville something or Evansville FC. The problem we ran into when we were initially trying to find a brand or find a name when we were just a Sunday league team is there's a lot of teams that have gone through that have been like Evansville FC or Evansville United. So it's really tough to find something that's unique and not initially tied with something else.
Right. And, there are only so many iterations of that same name, right? Like FC, SC, United, City, like that's 4 examples. And after that, you're left, I think that's kind of a spot Lexington was in, right? Lexington Sporting Club. A pretty unique name, in the schema of things, right? Like, yes, I know there are other sporting clubs, but in the American lexicon, that's pretty rare.
Right.
So I get you there. So, you talked about that first game at BGFC, right? So what made you all specifically interested in the UPSL and not something like, the Midwest Premier League or, something like that?
The travel. The Midwest Premier League really looked like it was a lot of Michigan teams. and things like that. We looked at the OVPL, but actually there was a team starting up in Evansville in the OVPL already, the Evansville Legends, who won the OVPL in their first season. They focus on college age and younger players, so like current college players and younger.
And so 3 and under, right?
I think that's their target. They definitely, I know last year they had some high school kids get some minutes for them, but their season starts in like the end of May and runs all summer, where we start in March, early March. I mean, tryouts were in January, so it's really tough for some of those college kids to be eligible to play even. So we kind of we don't work together, but we work in the same player pool. But there's enough, I mean, it shows that there's enough talent in Evansville for 2 teams to be. But yeah, we looked at the OVPL, but since there was already a team in Evansville, we didn't want to go that route. There's a league west of St. Louis that we looked into, but it looked like it was on its way out. A lot of teams have jumped ship from that.
Sounds like a good call on that.
Yeah, and honestly, Bowling Green was in BGFC was in the UPSL, and we felt like with the player pool we had, that we could at least be competitive with that kind of initial player pool we had. So we thought that would be a really good starting spot for us.
I mean, clearly competitive. Wasn't the first matchup 3-0 Hooligans?
No. The first matchup
last spring
1-0.
But not like last spring, like an official league.
UPSL, yes. The first game of the UPSL, we won 3-0.
I think I
thought you meant the very first game. I was trying to give some credit to BGFC.
I think I remember a fan, so I was at that game. I explicitly remember a fan yelling something in the vein of, "How did you all beat somebody 18-0 or something like that?" And I was like, "Good point. I get why you're asking."
We had some pretty entertaining fans. I'll say that they were a good time. They would tailgate in the parking lot and they'd have fun, and that was the atmosphere that we really wanted at our games. We wanted that like lighthearted, fun energy. As long as it's not derogatory, we are all for the banter and things like that.
As long as there's
our fans are really
of the hooligan name.
Yeah, our fan group's actually called the Hooligans. So,
all right.
They call themselves the real Hooligans. It's fun. It's been really exciting. We've got some more smoke bombs this year because they loved those last year. So now a guy has bought a drum now to try to be like your Tube. So,
all right, BGFC, y'all got to step it up now. So you kind of talked about this, but I just want to pick your brain a little bit further. You mentioned picking the Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division or Conference, whatever it is. They keep changing that part. But did you also look at like the Ohio Conference with teams like Indiana Guardians, Fox United, which is out of like way north up Indiana, or like Black Cat FC, which is out of Lafayette? Did you kind of look at that league as well?
So initially they put us in that league. Initially we went to that. The problem we ran into is a lot of the teams were from up near Chicago, and that's a 6-hour drive for us.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, hey, like we could play Nashville, Bowling Green, and Paducah all within 3 hours. There's no reason for us to travel that far north. Also, we don't hit a time change going south. We hit a time change going north. I honestly don't think the UPSL even realizes we're in Indiana. Because last season it was the Kentucky-Tennessee division.
Yeah,
and
still is.
And we're still in Indiana. I actually had a guy call me from the UPSL yesterday, and he was like, "Well, so what time is it there in Kentucky?" I was like, "Well, we're not in Kentucky. We're in Indiana." So, yeah, initially I think they thought we were from Indy. I don't know why. I think just Evansville's not really a known area, but we're in that different time zone. So Indy looks at us like we're Kentucky. But we looked at that initially. It was just our closest game in that division would have been Indianapolis, which is 3 hours, with a time change. So it was good. Travel was going to be tough. So we requested to go south with BGSC and those teams.
Well, and Indiana Gladiators, like, really good team. I think last spring or last fall, they went to at least the Elite Eight. Maybe it will only Sweet 16, but they went really far. So I totally understand not wanting to travel, staying in the same time zone, everything. Like it just makes sense. So kind of on that note, and this is specifically to the UPSL commissioner, with multiple teams in the Kentucky-Tennessee Premier Division from St. Louis, Evansville, and, who knows? We may even get a team out of, like, Indiana, out of Illinois, something like Carbondale or Metropolis. If they ever started a team, it would make a whole lot more sense for them to be in our division. So what would be your thoughts on a potential name change for the conference?
Oh, man, a name change. Wow. That's a lot of responsibility there. I don't know. I mean, you've got, so like the college conferences, like the college area, it's called the Missouri Valley.
Yeah.
So maybe something with the Valley or something like that. I don't want to steal too much of their vibe, but definitely.
I'm pretty sure they've trademarked the Valley.
Well, we could figure something. I'm sure we could come up with something.
So here's my pitch. The Mid-South.
Wasn't it the Mid-South, like, Expeditionary when BGFC joined?
I believe so. So if I'm trying to remember, I've seen that trophy like in the office before. And I think it just says like Expedition or Pioneer Conference or something like that. Like
Mid-South sounds great to me. I'm all for it.
Let's go. So, Commissioner of the UPSL, I'm talking directly to you because I know you listen. Change the title of the dang conference. Call me. Get on the pod.
We'd be happy if it was just called the Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana Conference, so we could be recognized as an Indiana team.
Well, but then Missouri and the St. Louis City Academy.
Well, they're new.
Happy.
We can talk about them later.
So, I want to pull it back to kind of what you talked about earlier. You did mention that you would be in favor of the UPSL doing more promotion and relegation. They kind of have some of that, right? If you look out in California, Texas, and maybe in New York, I could be wrong on the New York part, but they have that Primera division, and then I can't remember what the other one is. I don't know. This is bad podcast hosting. I should know those things. But so what would be your thoughts on if we started something like that in our region?
I'd be all for it. I think there needs to be a way to filter out some of these teams that come in, and not only as an ability standard, but as an organization standard. I think these teams that initially join the league need to go through that kind of first preliminary season. Even if they run through everybody, I think there should be that preliminary season for them to join and prove that as an organization they can do it. They're not just a one and done. Also, we want them to be competitive. We want them to be we would want the best teams in the region. It would give you something to fight for. We ran into it last season with Elizabethtown Ignite. They backed out of the season at the end. It would stop that, because if you wanted to come back the next year, you'd be in the lower division. And Guy,
I like that a lot, because then that forces buy-in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea a lot.
And I think there's enough teams regionally to do it. You could bring Indianapolis down. You've got some of those Ohio teams. Again, I think within about a 5-hour radius, you could really bring in some good teams and have enough to do it. And it would be something where last year the Hooligans were, I think, like 7th or 6th place. We were right on the outside of the playoffs. It makes those final few games so much more important, instead of you're sitting there and we realized no matter what happened against Urtube in that last game, we were already out of the playoffs. So guys didn't travel and things like that. But if now you went, hey, we can't lose this game by this many goals or we get relegated.
Right.
Now guys are buying back in. I also think it would make the league more competitive, in a sense of, if you got some of these teams out of Nashville that get relegated, the guys will want to play for the
Optic. I'm talking to you.
These guys would want to play for the first division teams. They would want to stay up and play in the higher division. So it would be something where these guys can, it's a little tough for travel for a guy from Evansville, but I think it would be reasonable for these Nashville guys and things like that to want to join a team that's in a higher division if they're more talented.
Yeah.
Or if they want the challenge and they don't make like Beeman's first team, can they go play for a Coptic and help them get promoted back up.
Yeah. By the way, so it's Premier. That's what BGFC and you all play in, and then it's Division 1. That's the one right below it.
Gotcha.
But yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think if we're looking kind of in our region, right? So in Western Kentucky, Southern Indiana, Southern Illinois, even St. Louis and over, you could legitimately put a team in Paducah, and Pumas can go to Mayfield. Just saying. Or vice versa. A new team in Mayfield / Murray, something like that. Owensboro could get a team. I mean, not to, pull too much from you all, but like Henderson could get a team possibly. Elizabethtown could actually have, another team pop up. I know Deportivo, they're not playing this spring. Elizabethtown Ignite's not playing. So maybe something like Elizabethtown FC could step up. Who knows?
I mean, I don't think there's a reason it couldn't happen. And I think it just takes some organization from the UPSL to actually organize it and get it started. It would piss some people off because some of these teams initially would probably get dropped. And some of these teams would be frustrated, but it gives you something to play for then. Also, some of these teams come in, and I promise you, it's not fun to get crushed every single game you played in. So before some of those teams, I think it would be a really good level for some of these teams. We have a couple of Hispanic teams locally that I'm sure would probably play. They're good at the Hispanic League level, but when you put them on, they couldn't play a BGFC or a Beeman or somebody like that, but they could give a Coptic a really, really good game. So you have teams like that I think would be willing, but they don't have that option.
Right. So what do you think is the solution for that then?
I think it would have to be probably a year in advance. You would have to, I think teams would have to probably so many top 6 or top 8 would immediately get pushed up, and any new teams coming in would have to go into that. I think it would give them time to build out that bottom tier division. And even if it's 6 teams, you're just looking at maybe the top 2 that get promoted or top 1 that get promoted up every year. Maybe a team that wins it and wants to stay where they're at. I mean, I think there's a way to fill it out. Obviously, the UPSL can do it. They've shown in other divisions they can do it. I think we have a big market for it. I think they could get more teams in and obviously profit from it from a UPSL standpoint. But I think it would allow, and it would also allow these teams that are in the first division, again, we'd have a standard. Hey, you can't, you're not going to play into the Premier League until you can hit that certain standard. The same way the English FA does it over there. You can't get promoted if you don't have a stadium this size, if you don't have all the amenities. So I think that is one way of holding teams to that standard.
Absolutely. No, fully on board with that. Because you look at some of the places we play, right? Like, I'll call them out. They're not playing this year. Deportivo, right? That field is small, bumpy, like a little bit hilly, kind of because it kind of seems to drain on the sides. Like, it's not an ideal place to play semi-professional with aspiring professional clubs there. It's not. Now, I believe Ignite, they played at the newer Elizabethtown Sports Park, right?
Yes, and but here's the thing. It was a very nice field. It was still small, but there was no stadium seating. There was a bathroom.
I didn't get to go to that one.
There wasn't a lot there for it to feel. It felt like a travel game again, where when you go to places like BGFC or you go to, we played St. Louis City this past weekend, and we played at a park there, but at least it had stadium seating, and it had a camera system. It had all the amenities to make it feel like it was more than just a travel game again. So that was for us. We got really frustrated when we traveled to these parks. The Elizabethtown Sports Park had a really nice facility there that you could have played at. We didn't play at it. We played at the field next to it.
Okay. Yeah, don't be too excited to come back down to Bowling Green. That park is a little different.
We saw the video of the Nashville Now game, and don't get excited to come back to us either. Our field's not in great shape this season either. With all
that turf field y'all are playing on?
So that turf field that we play on is just like an emergency. The field we played BGFC at last year, that grass field, is our home stadium.
Which I liked the stadium. Like, let me be honest. Like, I liked how it had seating all along one side. Maybe not the safest looking seating, sorry. But
No. It's been the same since I played high school there. That field has not changed a lick, and it's got some storm damage on like the press box now. So we don't own it. So that's part of the problem is we can't make changes to it. The school corporation owns it. So if the school corporation of Evansville listens to this, hey, we need to fix some things. But they won't even let us replace like light bulbs in the scoreboard.
All right.
Yeah. So we're limited. We can't play on the high school turf fields here. That there's so many of them, we can't play on them. The EVSC, because of COVID restrictions, won't let people outside sources on the turf fields. So we're limited to our options. So we get the EVSC soccer fields, which Fire, luckily, we're partnered with them, leases and takes care of. But when it comes to maintenance of like the stadium, the bleacher seating or the sound system or the press box or the scoreboard, we don't even get to do any of that. We tried to get more like an actual portable bathroom there, not just the porta potties, and they said no. I was funding. We were going to fund it. We were going to put it there and fund it, and they said no. Good times. It's a blast. It's things we have to deal with that no one tells you about when you start these projects.
No, not at all. So I want to kind of pivot to our last kind of bit of conversation today. I want to know, where are the Hooligans headed? Where is Evansville headed? Are you looking and exploring options to maybe get like a USL1 team? What is the future looking like for Midwest and for the Hooligans?
We really, we're content with where we're at right now. The goal, obviously, eventually is to try to continue to grow, but we know that we need the foundation to be built even stronger. We're going to need our own facility. We're going to need more backing. We're going to need more than my wife and I as the only two like staff members. So we're going to need some of these things that right now we just don't have. We're committed to doing this for 5 years with Fire. So that gives us some time to really build off of that.
Right.
I would say I'd love as a 10-year kind of goal to eventually have a stadium and be pushing for a USL one side. And pushing for that, we have a market for it if Evansville can buy into what we're doing. I believe, and actually the city, there were some private investors that a few years ago before COVID were looking at bringing a USL team to Evansville. It was one of the potential host cities. So if we can maybe figure out who those guys were and talk to them. But the idea is that if we can get to that level, we would love to. We're going to take it one step at a time. Right now, we're looking at, can we be successful and do it in a spring season and then grow into a fall season as the UPSL? Can we grow into both of those?
Right. Can you be successful in both and get the fans, all of that? Yeah.
Bingo. So we're baby steps. We are very happy with where we're at and what we're doing. We're still working on the foundation of things right now. We know that this is a long-term project. So for us, it's not something that we're trying to rush into. Our goal is to be good at what we're doing and then try to grow. If another league were to pop up and it was something that can be sustainable for us regionally, we would definitely look at options. We have enough guys for a reserve team, so we're definitely looking for an option for these guys to play in. So can we continue to grow and give those guys consistent games?
You really could benefit.
Oh yeah,
that's
part of the reason we would be one of the first people to jump in on that, because we have the guys to do it. When Allegiance FC backed out, it was a conversation internally. Could we successfully put a team in? We just didn't think it would be competitive, considering we played a group of Owensboro like high school kids with our reserve team and we lost 2-0. So, we want to make sure that if we were to put another team in, it would be successful. big thing that
second copy.
we're looking to do is, again, just continue to grow that foundation.
Yeah, you wouldn't want a second coptic. All right, Auston. I really want to thank you.
Definitely not.
Thank you for your time, my friend. Just let everybody know where they can follow along with Midwest Hooligans.
Yeah, so you can definitely most of our social media is just MW Hooligans. We have a website that has all of our stuff on it. Every social media you can think of. We've got a YouTube channel now that definitely we're trying to grow so we can live stream our games on that. So follow us on YouTube, subscribe to that. But the biggest thing is really any support we can get from the local communities, Owensboro, Henderson, to continue to grow that. So anybody that listens from that area, we'd love the support. We have a lot of guys on the team that are from those areas. So it's definitely, we'd love to get the support from those areas as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend. And I will kick it back to myself. And with that, we will close out this week's episode of the Bluegrass Soccer Cast. But before we go today, I do have a couple things I want to say, just based on some feedback that I've gotten recently. I want it to be abundantly clear that this podcast, the Bluegrass Soccer Cast, is completely independent. Completely independent. Everything that happens on this show is done and operated by myself and my producer. That's it. We're the only two people doing this. And it really would just be me if I was any kind of good at technology. We do not work with any specific club. We do not show favoritism towards any kind of a club. What I say, especially the dumb things I say on Twitter, especially the dumb predictions that I make, are completely independent thoughts. Everything I say as far as Louisville, Lexington, BGSC, Racing Louisville, Pumas, whoever, are my own work and my own thoughts. So don't think about this podcast is connected to any other club or anything else. Yes, I may do some commentary for another club, but that work is separate from what I would say on this podcast. When I'm doing that work, yeah, I'm promoting that club. I'm helping them in that way. But what I say on this show, that's me. Those are my thoughts. These are my words. And last thing I want to say, for those adults out there that are using my videos and my content as proof as why one club is better than another, log off from this right now. Never follow me on anything. Do not subscribe, like, or anything like that to this video or anything else that I do, because that is disrespectful and disgraceful. I do not make content for other people to weaponize against other clubs. I have thoughts. I'm a human being who is very opinionated, and I like having a microphone in my face, and I like talking. But if you're using my content out of context and using it to prop your club up and to tear down another and to persuade a child from going from one club to the other, that's some BS, and you know it. Be better, adults. Be better. But with that, I do want to thank you all so much for supporting me on this journey. Please make sure that you follow us on all our social medias. That's Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, BG Soccer Cast. And then make sure you give us a listen on all of our awesome platforms, such as Spotify, Google, YouTube, and other amazing platforms. Make sure that you give this video a like, comment, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff to help make sure we're spreading this awesome podcast out. This community is great, and I've really enjoyed it. There's just a couple of bad apples we got to throw out from here that we're not going to miss anyway. So thank you all so much. And this is Jimmie signing off.